Hello and welcome to the Aaron Werner podcast on iCode Media. We bring back a recent guest, our good friend, Dr. Ben, and he and I had a little bit of a text message. I don't want to call it it wasn't really an argument, a debate, a discussion, kind of the fun things you get into with your friends over a beer, except we weren't close to each other. But I'm hoping, in my mind at least, Ben was drinking a beer while we were going back and forth, and thought it would be an interesting discussion to share with you all. So Ben, thanks for coming back.
Yeah, Aaron, thanks for having me on. Been looking forward to the conversation, and I love the stuff that you put out with iCode, and I'm a regular listener, so we appreciate it's an honor to be on as well as being a listener.
Absolutely. Happy to have you here, man. So for those who don't know you and weren't on the last Book Nerds, you want to give us a little brief intro on all the things you do, because you are definitely much more than just an optometrist seeing patients 9 to 5.
Sure. So my name is Ben Thayil. I have a private practice down here in Miami, Florida, and that's been going on for almost 10 years now. So which is crazy. I look back and say, man, I grew up in this place. I was just barely 30 years old when I decided to just figure it out, because I didn't really know anything back then. So, and then I also have a leadership development organization called Lead OD. So we go in and we teach a lot of the things that I've been dragged through the mud and had to learn the hard way. I've realized that I have a passion for helping people, so they don't have to be dragged as bad through it as I did, So we deal with culture and team building and helping with turnover and things like that, and how we can make your business a place where people want to spend time with you, right? They're exchanging time for money. So that's an honor. I think it's an honor when people want to spend all their time with you, as a job, So I do a little bit of speaking. I'm almost done writing my first book, which hopefully will be out in the summer. So I think leadership is a very, very important thing that we touch on and talk about, but having some deep dives on what that looks like on your day-to-day life, I think that's important to share with people.
Absolutely. In fact, I love the topic of leadership, and I promise we'll circle back to our text debate. The latest book I'm listening to while I'm running now is Leadership 101. And it's interesting, just always going back to the basics, seeing, and self-analyzing while I'm running what I do well, the areas I have of weakness, and then defining what leadership means to me, because it means something different to everyone, or at least different leadership styles is different to everyone. How you get to to be that leader, how you define your way. I don't necessarily think there's one right way or wrong way to be a leader, but you do have to understand, I believe, who you are and find your way so you can stick to that.
Yeah, there's the alignment piece, right? Because we're all people and human beings, and you mentioned on the intro, we do other things apart from just being an OD. So a lot of times I tell people, like, I was Ben before I was an OD. I was an OD, so I'm very specifically an OD like 3 days out of the week at these times, right? Other than that, I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a son, I'm a friend, I'm all these other things. So sometimes we can get lost in something we all work so hard for, right? Our degree, and forget all the other hats that we've been wearing for the majority of our life. We've only been wearing the OD hat for a little bit of time, even though it may be decades. We've been all these other things for even longer than that. Definitely.
And for those who know me, unless I'm in the exam lane, I don't let people call me doctor, because I earned the degree, but I don't call my lawyer Bob, or the people in finance, MBA Mary. And so when we're working on business, or we're working on life, I'm Aaron, and you're Ben. I'm from Southern California, so we don't go formal. I'll never be Mr. Werner. That feels weird. And but yeah, I try to, like you, I recognize the role that I have, but that's the role that I play. It doesn't mean that defines who I am. And I'm not opposed to people who incorporate that into their identity. It's just not me.
Yeah, and in some areas it helps, right? When you don't feel like you have enough credibility, or you're first time you're in front of a group of people and you have to speak with some authority, sometimes it helps to put some letters in front of or after your name, you know?
Yeah, especially when they think that you're a real doctor. So
I said, "Oh no! If they're on the airplane, like, is there a doctor on board? Like, I don't know what they need."
yeah, that's too funny. Well, speaking of doctoring, I think this is a good intro into the
Yeah.
discussion. We were in a separate chat group, and somebody had made the comment that the refraction is one of the most significant things we do as optometrists. And then they use the phrase psychological clarity, to give clarity, which there's a lot to unpack there. And my comment to you is I'd love to discuss this because in our world right now, and specifically in optometry, I think there's too much weight that gets put on the refraction. I think that we, especially in independent channels, but my guess is across the board, we spend too much time on that one task in the exam lane. I think we put an outsized amount of effort and time and resources into that one task and tie too much of our identity to it, which to me is unfortunate because of all the really neat things that we do and are responsible for as primary eye care doctors. To just have the one thing be what defines us, and that kind of kicked off our discussion. Like I said, I don't think it was a debate because we landed pretty similarly, but I thought it was a very interesting discussion, and certainly one that when I've had with others has gut checked them because we do tie so much of our identity to our refraction.
Yeah. So I think I responded to that, about the refraction. I mentioned that I personally believe the refraction is one of the most valuable things we can do. And not value in the sense of the financial gain from it, because that's not the only value. We know the margins. That's why optical is inundated with all these other organizations that are trying to capitalize on the optical. But from a clinical standpoint and a practicing standpoint, it is one of the most valuable functions that we perform, because just in the conversation, we learn a lot more about the patient. We ask them, hey, when you drive at night or at any time of the day, do the lights bother you? Are you getting headaches? And then if they're correctable to 20/20 or not, that from clinically, that drives your brain down a certain avenue when you're asking these questions. And it literally happens in the 3 to 5 minutes of refraction. So it's not just from the financial aspect, that because well-run optical can fund all your other equipment, right? We know that piece, So stepping away from the monetary gain of refraction, the value in refraction is simply that, because it's the starting point of the visual system. Can we get this person corrected to 20/20? If we can't, we got to open up all the questions and open up the whole gamut of why, right? From the tear film to the cornea to the lens to all the way in the back, what's going on. So in terms of providing value to the patient, yes, we always joke the ones and twos and the A's and B's and any other thing that you want to add, talk about it, but it's a very simple thing, right? In the art of refraction. The other day I was refracting a child who had a 3 diopter jump in her myopia, right? And all of our lanes are digital, so the mom is looking at the screen as I'm turning the dials, and I just clicked up 3 diopters, and the child went from 2100 to 20/25, and she was like, "How did you know to do that?" And I said, honestly, I just did it. I can't. No one's ever asked me how I knew to do it, but that's where the art of the refraction comes into play, So, but I think that was my driving point, that the value of it goes into our clinical care, because it opens up a whole, I guess, treasure chest of how you're going to serve this patient.
I got you. So let me ask you this: when you're conducting your comprehensive routine wellness, whatever name you tie to it, your managed vision care exam, right? What's your flow for how you examine that patient, just in order of what you're looking at, testing, whatnot? How do you position each test in that sequence?
Yeah. So, I mean, our techs do all the data gathering, right? Which allows me to start the exam with a lot of conversation. So there's a lot of, tell me about your headaches. Tell me about this. I see you started a new medication. What's going on? And in that, I'm just gathering all the data of which direction we're going to go. And then you would try to find the main reason that you never let a patient leave the office without trying at your best attempt to solve the problem that they came in for. We could always, if they came in for glasses, and then we address that, and we also have to make sure that we're talking about dry eyes and glaucoma, suspect, and all of these things. But those things don't resonate with them as much as getting the problem solved that they came in with. Because you could have done the greatest exam and evaluation and clinically as a physician, but if the patient was like, yeah, you didn't really listen to me because I'm leaving with the problem that I came in with, then I don't think we served the patient well. In the textbook, it looked good because we did everything clinically, but from a customer service standpoint or patient relationship standpoint, we got to make sure that we're addressing their problems. So a lot of it is conversation. I don't do many questionnaires in the office because I feel like, for me personally, because we don't get to spend that much time with our patients, so the more I can interact with them verbally, you get the sensation of delivering, or patients never say, look, I didn't get to spend enough time with doc, and I know, I could be done in pretty quick amount of time with everything that's gathered around, but you want to make sure patients are having their issues addressed among everything else that.
Yep. So I agree with you on that. I don't like a whole lot of forms and questionnaires. I do like the conversation. I think the perception of time can be a lot more if it's looking
Correct.
at them, not looking at an iPad or a chart documenting. When you're doing the physical exam, do you start with the refraction? Obviously you talk to the patient when you walk in the room. What do you do
in
for
a
the physical
comprehensive,
exam?
I start with the refraction and kind of see what vision I'm working with, and that'll help dictate, because over time you learn there's certain responses you get, and you're like, oh, that's probably a cataract, or it's probably this, or it's probably an ERM or something. So just the refraction itself helps me get differentials going on in my brain.
There you go. So that's interesting. Something I didn't ask in our text. I had a professor at an externship site that taught me to start backwards. So I start with the fundus, and actually the refraction's the last thing I do before we send them out before I send them out the door. At the site of the VA, the one I spent forever trying to get a 20/30 patient, better. And he walked in, he goes, "If you looked at the macula?" I said, "No." And we looked at the macula, and he's like, "You're lucky to get 20/30. You just wasted 15, 20 minutes."
Yeah.
So it's interesting that you said the refraction gives you lots of information, because the reason I do it last is because I want that information before I go into it. Again, don't think there's a right way or a wrong way.
Yeah.
I always ask others to try to learn what to do better.
Can I ask you a question on that? So
Yeah.
How do you, because this is my rationale, because I understand why you do it that way, but if anyone asks a question like, what about washing the patient out, right? Because you've just shined all these lights in their eyes and then you're going to check their acuity. So has that been a thing for you, or it's not really been much of an issue?
Nope, I've never had that as a problem. So we do an optos screening on everybody, and we've very early adopters in that technology. Within the last 18 months, 2 years, we even brought in so I am cheating a little bit. We brought in Essilor Instruments has a VS 700 unit where the technicians do a subjective refraction. It's a refraction in a box, and we ran a study internally in the office and found out that it was more accurate than the refractions, the subjective refractions that our optometrists were doing. If anything was going to be over minus, it was going to be on the doctor side. 98% of them were within a quarter diopter of spherical equivalent, so they all would have passed. Both refractions would have passed boards, essentially. So I do have a subjective refraction to look at. I just don't do it. But so starting with the back of the eye, running through, I figure they're more washed out by staring at their iPhone and playing Candy Crush and killing their accommodative system anyway on that. So I've never had an issue. And then when we do dilate, some of the easiest refraction in the world are a dilated refraction. And
That's
so
true, yeah.
I've on paper you may have an issue there, but I've like I said, for the vast majority, I think it ends up working a little bit quicker if I can see something early on in the macula or the geofilm or the lens tells me that I don't really, where I'm going to end up on the refraction. So I don't have to push more than I need to. And I end at 20 happy and not a failed 20/20 or, me frustrated and them frustrated. So
yeah, and it gives you the opportunity to set the expectations.
Set the expectations and really, and I get to know them through that process. So you're questioning of, talking to them on the front end. You and I are doing the same thing. They're trying to figure out, is this a type A engineer I got to deal with? Is this, a grown up frat boy who doesn't care that, he's got holes in his socks and, he could be a -4 and say he never has vision problems. It kind of gives me an idea of who that person is and then pull out their real chief complaints during that time while I'm looking through and asking the right questions in between. So, but what I've also learned is that it helps me really do a 30-second double check of a refraction. Now, of course, there's the outliers like your kid that you just talked about that had the huge change. And I look at that as a medical change, just like I would if they came in and, their IOPs on the eye care and by the text and the screening were 30, I'm going to spend more time double checking and evaluating that. So if we do see a big change in refraction, of course, that in my mind, it becomes less routine and more medical driven. Let's figure out what's going on. But for the routine patients, I've found that the instruments honestly are probably more accurate than I am, or at least the same as accurate. And we spend a significant less time chasing down what's better, 1 and 2 or 321 and 322.
My favorite thing is which is better, 1 or 2? And no, like, please don't just choose 1 or 2. Don't just say no.
Well, I would like your thoughts on this. We years ago, it's been a long time, and this doc has since retired, but we brought in I bought a practice and merged him in with ours, and quickly became apparent that almost all of his refractions were straight off the auto refractor. And I immediately was appalled because I'd been trained that the one thing we do that nobody else in the world can do is a good refraction. He'd been with us for a little bit, so I went back and looked at all the remakes because I like data. His non-adapts were less than the rest of my doctors.
Interesting.
Right? It made me start thinking. I had the same reaction you did. And I started thinking even more, and I expanded it out and started looking at all of the different types of technologies that we adopt in the clinic that take the data gathering out of my hands. So I'll still do Goldman if I need to, but eye care gets done a lot more frequently. I rely heavily on my OCT to give me a lot of data. Of course, I'll look at maculas and nerves, but that OCT, if I'm being honest, I put a lot of weight on good results there, and same with the others. And I thought it was interesting that we still spend a lot of money on good autorefractors and, fancy digital refractors, yet that's the one thing that we have never really delegated to a technician or delegated to a piece of equipment that we spent money on that, quite frankly, the equipment probably can do it better than we can. It certainly doesn't have bad days and, is not tired after lunch.
True.
So I thought that was just very interesting that, in a situation that wasn't orchestrated, but, just factual data that those patients, and I'm sure they were self-selected already by him, but, that he had such success at something that I thought immediately I was appalled with the idea that that's what you were going to, go with, is just the auto refractor.
Yeah. It's interesting. Well, I think that touches on how we started the conversation about refraction. Sometimes we do have so much weight on the refraction that our identity as a doctor sometimes is in that. And I know we like to throw the phrase like, I'm not a refractionist and this and that, but it becomes something so significant that we do, because how many patients are seeing the ophthalmologist and seeing us, but they're just seeing us for their glasses, right? Because the ophthalmologist doesn't want to do refraction. So sometimes the patient can also attribute that to us, like, oh, I come here because, maybe my ophthalmologist or their tech did the refraction last year. My glasses came out all jacked up, right? So I just come back to you guys because you guys are, you do it much better things. So I think there's a whole a line of conversation between what we tell ourselves as ODs and maybe what the patients are telling us as well. Like, hey, you guys do my glasses and I love it, So and we love those patients too, right? We take care of everybody.
course.
So, but maybe that points to the fact of like, maybe we because we know we have good cars that drive themselves, right? We've relegated our driving to a computer.
Have you done one of those yet?
I have not. I've seen them around with
I've seen them too. I can't do it. There's a mental block right here. I cannot get in a car when nobody is in control.
Yeah, it's a little strange thinking about it, but to the point of like technology, we all talk about automation, but at what extent are we willing that to infiltrate our own practice, our own life, and things like that, right? Because ultimately we are the decision maker, but the quality of data we receive gives us the ability to give quality decisions on that. So it doesn't matter who gathers it as long as we know it's good and accurate because at the end of the day, it's your name on it or your face on it, right? So you want to be able to stand by the decisions you made,
Absolutely. And I'm by no means advocating that, for those listening, that the prescription that I get off my VS700 that my tech did is the final prescription.
Correct. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But there's no need for me to then put a phoropter in front of somebody, whether it's manual or digital. It's the same thing. It just depends on who's turning the little dial. And to do the work again. Because if the entering acuity in their glasses is good, the patient's not having complaints, it's a 35-year-old patient, you're not expecting change. And if everything says it's stable, there's no need for me to go back and do more, do verification just to do it. And but if I'm also going to take in that patient in consideration, if they're a commercial truck driver versus I'm a stay-at-home seamstress, their prescription might adjust slightly. Their needs might adjust slightly. I'm certainly the second pair, the vocation pair, is going to be a different recommendation. So I'm not advocating for releasing all of that responsibility. I'm just saying I think that we tie too much of our identity to I'm the data gatherer. I'm the one who said what's better, 1 and 2 better than anybody else.
Yeah. I think there's also an aspect of what is because patients will always ask, well, how much did it change? How much did it change? And you brought up the phrase earlier in our conversation of a patient is 20 happy. So I said, it's really hard to say how much it changed, but I can tell you how much it's going to improve everything you talked about, the glare at night, or I stop driving, I pull over when it rains, like all of those things. So to me, I'll tell the patient, it doesn't matter how much it changed. It actually matters how much it's going to improve your life. And then when we have that type, because then you go around and you show them all these numbers, like, it takes a long time to understand what all those numbers mean, So correct. So whether it changes or not, you're looking at the impact that whatever change, big or small it is going to positively improve their life.
I like that a lot because it's Chris Wolf talks a lot about identity, and I've piggybacked on a lot of his things. And I think our identity is much better tied with how we improve people and how we take care and we perform our job than the number that we got.
Correct.
If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I think too often, though, we're judged by the number because that's how you pass school. And you and I both work with practices. I laugh because I'll ask them business questions and they struggle with the answer because they want to go back and be very factually accurate. And just, give me a ballpark. Give me a rounding error. The difference in capture rate when I'm asking you on our initial visit and consult with an office, whether it's 60 or 65% really doesn't make a difference, right? Am I good, bad, or ugly is all I'm looking for.
Down or flat. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Yeah. And but because we're trained to be hyper accurate, they're going to go run the numbers and find out if it's 62.85%, and which is too much. And so I think that there's too much of our identity tied with that specific number as opposed to, hey, I improved you, because a quarter step could make a world of a difference to somebody, or it could be negligible. And so it's not the quarter step that's the difference; it's the impact that it has on somebody. I really like how you rephrase that when somebody said, what changed or how much did it change? So give that answer again, because I'm going to write it down. I'm going to steal that one.
Yeah. So if a patient says, well, how much did it change? because they're a lot, in my experience, they're judging whether it changed. Is the doctor going to tell me to go spend a bunch of money in the optical, right? Um, so I don't, you're answering the question not from a financial standpoint, you're answering it from a lifestyle standpoint, right? So how much did it change? You know what? It's changed enough that it's going to help you feel more comfortable when you're driving at night. It's changed enough that when we update your glasses, you're not going to worry about if it's going to rain or not because you got to pull over. It's all of those things. So I'm answering their question by addressing the problems they presented to me through the questions that I asked earlier to show how big change or little change, that answer, you're not asking me that really. You don't care if it goes from a point 125 to a point 50 because that doesn't mean much for you. Underneath that, you're hoping that that change solves your problem. So I speak directly to the problem.
I like that a lot. You're asking the question, you're answering the question they're asking without them knowing how to
Correct.
ask the real question. And sometimes in there, and like I don't run a nonprofit. I want to sell glasses. So
Of course,
doing that, I think it's also teeing them up successfully for an appropriate sale if it's necessary. And you could have two patients both with the same prescription. One's a contact lens wearer, never wears their glasses, and is a -1. At home, you operate fine. Do I need to update it, get a new pair of glasses every year? Probably not, unless you're the kind of patient who cleans their glasses with, spit after sucking on a Jolly Rancher and steel wool. And we all know those patients. You put the gloves on when they come in to clean them, versus the one that is that type A engineer and very particular. And, a quarter step may make the world of a difference because they came in complaining that, hey, I'm not comfortable driving at night. And they are sensitive to small little shifts.
I think also it's the value proposition, right? Because in Miami, Florida, where I'm at, saturation is a big thing, So can a patient go get 2 progressives for $69? Can they do that? They can, but that they're buying a product, right? Whereas we're solving their problems. So we've had patients say like, doc, I can get this stuff cheaper, but you guys are so good to me. Like you guys understand it. You guys get it, So I think that's where we add value. So we don't worry so much about saturation. We worry about problem solving for the patient.
I like that. And along that line, here's another question that I just thought of, again, based on our conversation. Because we're problem solving so much and because our scope has expanded significantly, and a little just history from how I see that. My dad graduated from SCCO back when it was SCCO, and he had diagnostics. I remember my grandpa being very proud of the fact that he didn't need any drugs to do an exam. Well, my dad graduated diagnostics, had to go back and get therapeutics. I was the first class in California that graduated with glaucoma privileges. And so we've significantly expanded our role and responsibility in eye care. It's not just about a pair of glasses anymore or binocular vision. Now it's health, and it's not even health limited to the eye. It's systemic health that I believe we're responsible for as primary care providers. Do you think that if our identity tied so much to the refraction and doing the refraction and trying to tee up for the optical sale limits us in the ability that we can care for all the other responsibilities that we have when we're seeing that patient?
I think it can. And I'm speaking from experience because when I first bought my practice, it was established, but it was dead. And the fastest way I knew how to make money was to try to sell glasses. So being, a first grade business owner, I said, I just need to get this person out to the optical. Could it have clouded my judgment in my thinking of what my goal is for the patient? It's like, yeah, I was clouded with trying to get this practice to survive financially, So I think there is a piece where we can get caught up with making sure we get the sale, making sure we do from the optical side of trying to capture that. So, but there is a line of like, yeah, we got to be a good business stays in business, right? We have to be profitable,
100%.
And like we talked about, the margins in the optical are very good, and you can kind of create them to how you need them to be, to help fund other things. But again, that's not the only thing that we are focused on doing, because I think we're in a really exciting time of eye care with, yes, let's get to a point where we can offload the refraction and maybe the optical becomes a passive form of income for the business because it's handling it because, depending on the state that you're in, you're too busy doing lasers or cutting lumps and bumps out of people's eyelids and things like that, because that is high value, high revenue stuff that only you can do, right? So we're a big fan of everyone should do the thing in their practice that they are really good at doing it. So to this day, I'll still answer a phone every once in a while in the practice, and the patient would say, "Doc, is that you?" I'm like, "Yeah." Like, "Why are you answering your phone?" I said, "Because it's my phone." But the point is, like, if I went in every day and answered the phone every single time, is that the best use of my time? It's not, right? So can we, right? I guess we start this conversation on your podcast. Can we view the refraction that way? Is that the most valuable thing we as the physician should be doing on a day-to-day basis, or are there other high value things that?
I like that. And by the way, I've been banned from answering the phone in my office because I don't know our PM system well enough to do the things like schedule an appointment, and I screwed up too many of those. And so for a while, they tried to take away my password, so I couldn't even access the scheduler.
You really screwed it up, yeah.
I really screwed it up. So I'm not allowed to answer the phone. They much prefer that it goes to voicemail, although now we've got remote team members who answer it and whatnot. But yeah, it's so I'm a little jealous that you still have that ability in your world, because even though I own mine, it's and I'm at the top of the food chain, I still have
that. You're just writing the checks. That's what that means.
Yeah, it's I forgot about that till you just said it. But yeah, I agree 100%. I think that that in any system, whether it's we were talking about flag football before we hit record, everybody has a role to play. And somebody's going to be the one that is always the star that gets the MVP award every time because they're the most visible, or they end up scoring the most touchdowns or whatnot. But everybody has a role to play. And if somebody doesn't play their role, or the wrong person tries to do too much, it all falls apart. And so I think within our systems that, I wish there was a better word than delegation, because I don't think it's telling people what to do. It's allowing people to do what they do, and then getting out of their way and just trusting each other that the system runs. But the more I do any sort of data gathering, I think the less I'm doing doctoring. I don't
Correct.
think that there's I think there's a trade-off on both. I don't think I can do both well.
Mm-hmm.
The Myopia Collective. CooperVision and the AOA have partnered in a groundbreaking initiative to change the way optometrists in the U.S. treat children with myopia. The purpose of the Myopia Collective is to rally the profession of optometry and its allies to interrupt the status quo and elevate the new standard of care for children with myopia. Every individual is encouraged to become a member of the collective. By joining, you commit to taking action to help slow the progression of myopia in children. You'll receive updates and information about the collective and its work in the fight against myopia, gain access to educational opportunities and resources offered by the collective, and hear from change agents, the ambassador optometrists selected to serve as advocates for community and policy change that facilitates the mission of the collective. Scan the QR code or click on the link in the show notes to join the collective today. In the past, our focus revolved around prescribing MacuHealth or MacuHealth Plus to patients at risk of macular degeneration, while also recommending it to collegiate and professional athletes for enhanced contrast sensitivity in sports performance. However, this year's introduction of the Life Meter has been a game changer. The Life Meter revealed a concerning truth. Many of my patients have alarmingly low skin carotenoid levels, indicating potential deficiencies in essential body tissues like the retina and brain. Supported by over 30 peer-reviewed publications, Life Meter's accuracy, consistency, and effectiveness has been demonstrated across 2,000 subjects with diverse backgrounds. With this newfound insight, I can now have meaningful conversations about carotenoid levels with all of my patients, even those who may seem outwardly healthy. To learn more about this empowering technology, feel free to contact your MacuHealth representative or click on the link in the show notes. Together, let's optimize patient care and elevate their well-being.
I think that we're learned from in school, right, to gather every piece of information ourselves, from von Graef to everything, right, from front to back, and they're good skills to have, because when you go in whether you own a practice or not, you're kind of a leader, the clinical leader there. So if data doesn't make sense and you're part of the retraining, it's good to know those things. But it's also good to know that it doesn't have to sit on you all the time, because there's those things matter, but they could matter for your other team members, right? Because you can find that they can find their value in making sure that the doctor's getting good information.
Yep, absolutely. We went through an exercise, and we continually do this, but we started it about a year and a half ago, where we looked at what we can start cutting out of the exam. Yeah, there's always what can you add? What piece of equipment can you buy? What new tests can you do? How many more, how can you use more functionalities in the equipment you have? And we went the opposite and said, what can we cut out? Which was really difficult. I wasn't expecting the fight that I was going to have with my doctors, because they valued it. Sometimes they had a very good clinical reason. A lot of times it was just, this is what we do. Well, what are we going to do if we don't do that? And but it was interesting when we started getting rid of things, our acceptance to whatever we're selling. And I like the word selling, because at the end of the day, you're trading time and resources, resources being time and money, for something. Our IPL capture rate went up, our optical sales went up. And I think it's because we got out of the way from a psychological selling point. But it was hard from an identity standpoint to give something up, whether it was taking meibomian gland images screenings on everybody, or running an OCT screening on everybody, or a visual field screening on everybody. That's a lot of data that it doesn't have a high margin of return. At least for us, it didn't. So giving that up, it was interesting to see, one, how hard it was for us to do, but then also the positive effect that it ended up having on patients, because if they're spending with us, it means they perceive the care to be better.
For sure. Yeah, change management is the most. So you're at a different side of life with your kids than I am, but I have very young kids. I have a 3-year-old and 7-month-old, and my 7-month-old, or both of them, when they were infants, they taught me about change, right? Because when things aren't going well, right, they're kicking and screaming, and they're kicking and screaming, and you're like, oh, you realize you have to change them. Like, you literally have to implement change to them, right? And they're kicking and screaming the whole time the process of changing is happening. And until that process is done, they feel better. So adults are no different. We'll kick and scream when there's change implemented. And then once it's all done, you're like, oh, actually, I feel better. Thanks for helping me go through that. So I learn a lot from being a parent to very young children about leadership and change management and things like that, because it's really no different if you can draw the parallel.
No, it's very similar, and I love parallels with kids. I will tell you that as a grandparent now, my grandson just turned 2. The temper tantrums are a lot cuter than when they were my kid. It's, I will never say I enjoy a temper tantrum, but, I find joy in watching him hunch his shoulders, and, the fake cry and the fake little temper tantrums and whatnot. I think having gone through it multiple times, it just in a different stage in life, like you said. Yeah, I miss those days sometimes with my kids, and other days I'm really glad that it's not that
gone. Yeah.
I sleep better. I have longer nights of sleep now. I don't get woken up in the middle of the night too often.
There you go.
But how much in that change management, since we're on that topic, for adults, do you think that we're resisting change because it has a perceived negative effect towards our identity, or we're resisting change just because change in and of itself is hard, and we just don't want to have the cognitive load of thinking, what am I going to do next? It was easier just to stay in the status quo.
Yeah, I think it's both. I think you touched on the front and obvious thing of like, oh, change is difficult. Like, I got to learn a new system. I got to learn this thing. But I think subconsciously it's the identity piece. I think there's a piece in there like, oh, I finally got this thing down, and I look professional. I know how to use this. I know how to do that. I know what decisions to make. If something goes wrong, I can troubleshoot it. So there's an identity piece of being strong in that area. And then when there's a change, we're like, well, what is that going to do to who I am or how I see myself in this system? Now, we may not say that explicitly, but I think you're touching on it when we say, isn't an identity piece. So on the front end of it, change is annoying because we have to, I think about it this way, and I use this as part of patient education since we're talking about refraction, this conversation. When we talk about adaptation, we talk about how, hey, listen, if you're used to going to work the same way every way for the same direction for the last 15 years, and then all of a sudden there's a construction detour, you're really annoyed when there's a detour. Like, oh, I got to find a new route. But over time, what if that detour became your new way of going to work? Then all of a sudden it's not annoying anymore. You just know what to do. So on the refraction side, I tell patients like your visual system is going to work the same way every day, all the time. And we're putting a detour in front of them, and your brain's going to be like, oh, this is the worst way. Why do we have to do this? Let's go back to the old way. So yes, if you come in here and say you see better out of your old glasses, I get it. Your brain is telling you that, right? But we're creating a new way for your brain and your visual system to go to work. So when it comes to change, eventually that change what was going to become normal, that what felt like a detour and going off the path and doing something different, that in itself one day will just be like, oh yeah, well, this is just what we do. And then as soon as you get used to it, guess what we got to do? We're going to change something again.
Yep.
But that's the nature of life. Nothing is ever the same.
It's funny you brought up the analogy of driving, because just for fun and not to have it be routine, I always try to take a different way home.
There you
Right?
go.
Just maybe go a different way around the block or whatnot. And it annoys my kids and my wife to no end. And for me, it adds a little bit more variety. I mean, it's not even really a spice. It's just slightly different. And
But even there's cognitive benefits to that. There's things like, take a different way to work or use your non-dominant hand to brush your teeth. Like there's a lot of cognitive benefits to do.
yeah, I haven't tried the left hand brushing the teeth. That would feel really awkward. But I like doing it. Or even my normal running routes, I'll run backwards sometimes, which completely feels like a totally different run. And just to not get in the trap of comfort with status quo. Maybe that's me in general.
Do you ever run? Because I know you're a big runner and you map out your runs. Do you ever create a route where the map looks like a picture of something?
Oh, picture? I've wanted to.
Yeah.
But it just feels so tedious to sit and do that ahead of time. Often I'll just go off on a run and not know where I'm going. And because I'm on Garmin training plans because I like having in that world somebody just tell me what to do.
Yeah.
And so I know I'm going for a hour and 30-minute run at basically a 10-minute pace. So I go somewhere and park and then just start running. And if there's an interesting street to run down, I'll run down that interesting street. Or I try to do some math games in my head so that I end up back where I need to, because there's nothing worse than getting back to the end and you still have another 3 minutes to run, because those 3 minutes are the most painful minutes of the entire run. So I'd rather get short and have a cool down walk. But I try not to have a really strict map. I'm jealous of the people that can do that though, because those pictures are awesome.
They can be funny.
Yeah, some of them are neat. And I've got a lot of really interesting streets around here that I'm sure I could come up with something good. With my luck, though, I'll pick the street that has the 6% incline that I end up having to run up. So, but this has been interesting. When we started in talking about refraction, I don't think it was about refraction, but I do think it was about the identity that we put on things and how we see ourselves in that identity. And I don't know if we got deep enough into, or really deep into, how we change that identity, but I think just recognizing where we pull, what makes our identity, what information we pull to build that is important.
Yeah, I think identity is an interesting, because it's so individualized, right? Because it's literally who you are, right? That's your identity. And I think that once we can accept that our identities can be different in different arenas. Like you can be with your friends and chummy and laugh about things, but you can't do the same thing at work. And so sometimes we can feel fragmented. We're like, well, who am I? Am I this person or am I that person? And so I think identity comes to when we have all those fragmented pieces, we don't feel like we're pulled in different directions, but we feel a sense of wholeness. We feel like I can be consistent more so internally, right? So it's that the identity piece is internal. I'm consistent in who I am and the decisions I make. When things get tough, I know what direction I'm going to go to. I'm not going to be swayed by the things that are going on around me. So I think when we have our identity in like, oh, I'm a doctor, or I'm a father, or when it's in those things, those are external pieces that tell us who we are. But the external pieces don't last. They're coming and going. So if we can find a way to know who we are internally, I think that helps us dictate how we function out in the real world. Because I think that's one of the problems we have is a lot of us want to find our identity in something when actually it does come from within each and every one of us, right? And it's a conglomerate of things. It's part of your upbringing. It's part of what your values are. It's part of what you believe, like all of those things. So when you can be strong enough on the inside, that allows you to handle the pressures on the outside.
I like that a lot because I see our peers when sales are good in the optical, they feel on top of the world. When sales are down, or a patient who's been a patient for 5 years goes somewhere else, they take it personally. And I think very often or seldom is that really a personal attack. It's just what it is. And on the flip side, my colleagues who are very confident in who they are and in their own skin, they want to change things. They're not thrilled that sales are down. They're not thrilled that a patient has chosen a different provider, but they don't take it as a personal affront. They look at what that means. It's kind of like the athlete that drops a catch or loses a game. Doesn't mean they're a bad athlete. It just means you dropped a catch or you lost a game. And what can you take from that and you learn on? Outside of work, it's, I've got a teenager and it's not uncommon when I get told that I'm ruined her day or she hates me. But I don't take that as a negative hit on me being a dad. Often it's because I'm being a good dad and I'm making her go to bed and not letting her stay up and binge watch a TV show on a school night or something along those lines. My kid's wonderful. But she's still a kid, and
exactly, yeah,
and going through her feelings. And so my goal is not a kid who thinks that I walk on water, because that's not good. So I've learned that those outbursts are, reflections of my wife and I parenting well, because we have plenty of other reinforcements showing that, we have a good kid and we have a wonderful relationship with her. So I think that, but to your point, it's the internal confidence. It's the internal story that I've told myself, that facts that I've chosen to believe that say, I'm a good dad. I'm a good doctor. I'm a good business person. Can I be better? Absolutely. But it doesn't take away from me being really good at what I do on those things. And that's my identity.
Yeah. And I think curiosity plays a big role in it, because if that patient does leave or your kids are really upset at you, we could take it personally, or there's that phrase like sometimes you win and sometimes you learn, right? We don't really look at a failure, but you can lean into it and say, hey, listen, we love seeing you here. We're not going to try to hold you hostage to keep you here. Like, we're not going to hold your records and make it really difficult for you to leave. But it's like an exit interview. Like, we just want to know why, right? We get all these spam. I mean, they're probably legitimate companies, but we get all these spam emails and contact us like, hey, we see you have these 1-star reviews. You want to help us to get them off your Google reviews, right? At this point, we're over like 600 reviews, right? We do pretty well on our reviews. And I'll respond to them, spam or not. I said, hey, listen, we've learned a lot from our 1-stars. We fully embraced it. I've never taken them personally. Well, maybe when I only had 5 reviews and I had 1 stars, I took them personally, right? But you can audit them. You can kind of exhume the dead body of them and look back and say, yeah, we did screw up here. We did screw up there, and make them teaching moments, because they're not failures. They're just part of an experience. And we have to learn from that, because once we accept we're not going to do everything perfectly, patients will come and go from our life. People will come and go from our life. As long as you haven't had any bad intentions towards that, that's just how it is. That's just how it goes.
No, I feel the same way. It took a long time to get to the point where I got the email that said, hey, you got a review, where my hands didn't get sweaty when I clicked on it. And when I realized that they weren't defining who I was, those emails, honestly, now, it'll sound bad, but they almost seem like more of just a nuisance I don't It's an email
True.
I have to check that I don't care about. And yeah, a lot of the 1-stars we've called back, and some of them were very legitimate. We always have that one patient that just everything seems to constantly go wrong for. And it's a comedy of errors. Or sometimes the patient wasn't a good fit, and it's oil and water, and we weren't the right place for them. But I appreciate either way them sharing and moving on. We look at how many more positive reviews we have, which is where I want to pull our identity from, and where I try to drive my team's identity from. Look at all the people who did appreciate the work you do, not the one or two who didn't. There was an interesting, and I'll kind of wrap up with this because we're getting close on time. I was talking with Chris a while ago, and I said there's a question that I've started asking groups of people, and the answer is really interesting to me. Because according to our professional people, optometrists, not just change vision, but we're changing lives and saving lives. So you see a patient, you diagnose a brain tumor, and send them off to neurology. They, do surgery on them, and you've saved their life. You see another patient who's frustrated about something in the optical. You get a 1-star review on Yelp. You're having a drink that night. Is the drink a celebratory drink because you saved somebody's life, or is it I'm drowning my sorrows in my drink because I got a 1-star Yelp review? And about 99% of the room puts their head down because they know they're drinking because of the 1-star Yelp review, which really drives me nuts, because all the stuff that we do, and you just saved a life.
Yeah.
And you had that effect. It should be celebratory 100% of the time. And what that tells me is that our identity and egos are so tied to that Yelp review, or something of a commodity that was sold in the optical. I just made a lot of people mad because I use the word commodity, but at the end of the day, it's a box. You can switch it out. You can change things. You can't do that with a life. You can't do that with that kind of impact you have. And so my hope is that through these discussions, we help our colleagues and ourselves self-analyze a little bit to say, hey, how do I get to that point where I love what I do, I'm good at what I do, and I'm changing lives? I'm going to step on some toes in the process, but I'm going to change lives.
We all went to school to change lives, and then I think with the business of healthcare, we can sometimes get lost in it. But we can dig deep down again and say, hey, I came in this to change lives, and what does that look like on a day-to-day basis?
Yep. I love it. Well, Ben, thanks for the conversations, both recorded here that we share with everybody else, and certainly the text message ones. I recorded a monologue a week or two ago where I said that it's important, the circle that we surround ourselves with, and the influence that circle has on us. So I appreciate you being part of that circle. Newer edition, but have enjoyed getting to know you and your insights. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, Aaron.
Of course.